In the weeks following the enigmatic broadcast of Lucas's final message, a pervasive unease settled over the investigative community. The notion that the archive was more than a mere repository of memories, that it was a living, evolving entity, had transformed a complex case into an unfathomable enigma. Dr. Lila Hess, Claire's former therapist, became the focal point of renewed inquiries. She revealed a chilling detail previously withheld. During their sessions, Claire often spoke of a recurring vision, a door without a handle, standing alone in a void. Claire referred to it as the door that remembers. She believed that behind this door lay the origin of the archive, Dr. Hess recounted, a place where all forgotten things reside, waiting to be remembered. A breakthrough emerged when digital forensics experts, re-examining the Oslo footage, discovered an embedded cipher within the video's audio spectrum. Decoding it unveiled a set of coordinates pointing to an abandoned psychiatric facility in upstate New York, the Ashcroft Institute. Once renowned for pioneering memory regression therapies, the institute had been shuttered in the late 1980s under murky circumstances. Rumors whispered of unethical experiments aimed at unlocking repressed memories, with patients subjected to prolonged mirror gazing intended to manifest their deepest traumas. Upon arrival, investigators found the facility in decay, its walls adorned with graffiti and remnants of its troubled past. In the basement, they uncovered a room lined entirely with mirrors, each meticulously covered with heavy black drapes. At the center stood a solitary chair facing a large, uncovered mirror. Etched into the dust-laden floorboards was a phrase that sent shivers down their spines. To remember is to open the door. Further exploration led to the discovery of a concealed archive room. Within, a collection of deteriorating tapes labeled Project Mnemosyne detailed the Institute's clandestine experiments. The recordings revealed that patients were exposed to mirrored environments to stimulate memory retrieval, but many reported visions of a young boy observing them, a boy matching Lucas's description. One particularly disturbing session featured a patient named Eleanor Reed, who, under duress, described the door from Claire's visions. "It's always there, in the corner of my eye, a door without a handle, and behind it, whispers memories that aren't mine." Eleanor's session ended abruptly as she began screaming, her reflection reportedly moving independently before the tape cut to static. The implications were staggering. The Ashcroft Institute's experiments suggested that the archive wasn't merely a passive collection of memories, but an active, sentient force capable of interaction and manipulation. The recurring motif of the handleless door hinted at a barrier between conscious reality and the depths of the archive, a threshold that, once crossed, could blur the boundaries between self and the collective consciousness. As investigators delved deeper, they uncovered connections between the Institute's lead researcher, Dr. Malcolm Ashcroft, and Project Remember, the Arctic facility tied to Lucas's origins. Correspondence between Ashcroft and Evan Walker hinted at collaborative efforts to harness the archive's potential, with Lucas positioned as the linchpin in their experiments. The revelation that Lucas might be both a product and a conduit of these experiments cast a new light on his abilities. His capacity to appear in visions, manipulate perceptions, and access hidden memories suggested he had transcended human limitations, becoming an embodiment of the archive itself. In a final, haunting discovery, investigators found a journal belonging to Dr. Ashcroft. Its last entry read, "We sought to unlock the mind's deepest corridors, to give form to the formless. But we have opened a door that remembers too much, and now it will not be closed." As the team left the decaying halls of the Ashcroft Institute, the weight of their findings pressed heavily upon them. The door had been opened, and the boundary between memory and reality, self and other, had been irrevocably blurred. The archive was no longer a hidden specter of the past. It was an ever-present entity, watching, remembering, and perhaps, waiting to be remembered. The Ashcroft Institute had been abandoned for decades. The wind that whipped through its crumbling facade seemed to carry secrets, whispers half-formed, as though the building itself remembered. After investigators unearthed the tapes and Dr. Ashcroft's final journal, they returned the materials to a private federal lab in Langley, where a specialized team began decoding what they now referred to as cognitive interference recordings. One tape, in particular, drew immediate attention. Dated November 13, 1987, 2 weeks before the Institute's abrupt closure. It featured a subject identified only as Claire Number 7. Her voice was unmistakable. The resemblance to Claire Bennett wasn't just auditory, it was visual. Facial comparison algorithms returned a 99.6% match. The woman in the tape was Claire, or a version of her. She sat before a mirror, her eyes locked on her reflection, unblinking. The therapist's voice crackled over the speaker system. "Tell us what you see." Claire Number 7's voice came slow, dreamlike. "I see myself, but I'm older. And there's a man behind me. I don't recognize him, but he's smiling. Too wide. Like he knows what I'm thinking before I do." Then she leaned forward, whispering directly to the mirror. "You're not real. I remember now." Static engulfed the recording, and when it cleared, the room was empty. No Claire. No reflection. Just the mirror. The discovery shook the investigation team to its core. Had Claire been part of the Ashcroft experiments as a child? Was she unknowingly carrying repressed trauma from a life she no longer remembered? Or was this Claire Number 7 someone else entirely? To find answers, Agent Miriam Lowe, one of the lead federal investigators, contacted Claire in protective custody. Upon viewing the footage, Claire didn't speak. Her hands trembled. When she finally did, her words chilled the room. "I used to have a dream about that mirror," she said. "When I was a little girl, there was a woman inside it. She looked like me, but she wasn't. She was screaming, but no sound came out." The federal team began cross-referencing historical missing persons cases. A breakthrough came from an unlikely source, an elderly nurse named Margaret Ellis, who had worked at Ashcroft during its final months. She recalled a patient named Claire. Not a last name, just Claire. "She was different," Margaret said in a taped interview. "Never spoke much. Always sketching. Doors. Mirrors. A man with no face. She drew that man over and over again. We just called him the Watcher." When asked if she remembered what happened to Claire, Margaret paused. "One night she vanished. No one talked about it. And then, the Institute closed. Just like that. The Watcher. The archive. Claire. Lucas." The names formed a tangled web that seemed to point in one direction. The mirror room. A decision was made to return to Ashcroft for one final search. Under tight security, a combined team of agents, forensic psychologists, and a mirror imaging specialist descended into the basement of the Institute. The mirrors had been sealed after the first visit, but this time they were activated. A custom-built system flooded the room with non-visible infrared and electromagnetic pulse frequencies, designed to test for quantum interference, technology typically reserved for experimental deep-state simulations. What they captured defied explanation. Reflections began to misalign. The team stood still, but the mirrors did not. Movements in the glass played on delay or entirely differently. One mirror, the largest of them all, displayed not the current team, but the 1987 team. In grainy grayscale, Dr. Ashcroft appeared in his lab coat, standing beside Claire Number 7. It was like time had folded into itself. Suddenly, a whisper flooded the audio channels. Not through the air, but directly into the microphones. "She remembers." And then static. The footage was archived. The mirror room sealed once more. But what came next was undeniable. The archive went active. People began to report visitations. Not dreams. Not hallucinations. Manifestations. They described a child standing silently at the edge of their beds, watching, saying nothing, and always mirrors in the room would crack just slightly afterward. One woman in Portland said she returned home from work to find her apartment rearranged. Photos she never took lined her bedroom wall. Photos of herself, asleep. The timestamps were from the previous night. Another report from a man in Iowa. His bathroom mirror began flickering between reflections. At one point, his reflection smiled while he did not. Then he vanished. Only the mirror remained. Claire, now kept under 24-hour psychiatric surveillance, began drawing again. Her sketches were dark, jagged doors, endless corridors, and a figure standing at the far end of every hallway. She said he was whispering. They asked what he said. Her answer? Don't forget me. Agent Lowe became obsessed. She dove into every theory, quantum bleed-throughs, experimental psychological implants, even theories of parallel consciousness. She began noticing inconsistencies in her own memories. Days missing, conversations she didn't recall having. She kept waking up with fragments of glass in her bed. Meanwhile, the FBI's Behavioral Sciences Division quietly issued an internal alert about Event MN37, a growing pattern of anomalous memory disturbances tied to individuals who had been exposed to the archive files or had viewed the Ashcroft footage. Then, in a twist that stunned everyone, Lucas reappeared. Not in person. In a transmission. Broadcast over a dead satellite band long thought inactive. It was short. Just 6 words. I'm not the only one. The feed cut. But not before a frame, just one, flashed on screen. When slowed and enhanced, it showed the reflection of someone else standing behind Lucas. A woman. It was Claire. But older. Pale. Eyes entirely black. No one could explain it. No one has. And no one has dared to go back into the mirror room since. The archive has gone quiet again. But the reflections have not. They whisper. And sometimes they remember more than we do. They thought they had locked it away. The Ashcroft mirror room was sealed under federal order. All known footage was quarantined. Claire was placed in an isolated neuropsychiatric facility in an undisclosed location, and Agent Miriam Lowe, fractured by the investigation, was placed on indefinite leave. But some mirrors once looked into, remember you. It began with the whispers. Not in dreams this time. Not through cameras or cracks in surveillance feeds. People, random people unrelated to the case, began reporting hearing someone else's memories. Words they'd never spoken. Names they never knew. And always followed by one question, repeated over and over. Do you remember who you were? Then came the suicides. For in a week, each victim had one thing in common. A journal or note scribbled with the same phrase over and over. She's coming through. Surveillance from one of the victims' apartments captured something truly chilling. At 2:47 a.m., the hallway camera turned to static. When it returned, the mirror in the entryway, previously clean, now bore a foggy handprint. And written beneath it, in backward letters, I never left. Authorities tried to rationalize. Mass psychosis, suggestibility, internet hysteria. But the mirror room was active again. Readings, electromagnetic, thermal, acoustic, were spiking. And then the final piece dropped. A second transmission. This time, it came from a private satellite system run by an obscure military subcontractor, originally decommissioned in 2001. The voice was unmistakably Lucas, but degraded, warped. His words. She's not a memory. She's a mirror. And she's learning to walk. The message ended with coordinates. Back to Ashcroft. Despite a full lockdown, Agent Lowe, still tormented by dreams and fragmented time, went rogue. Disguised and with stolen credentials, she made her way to the facility one last time. The tapes recovered later from her helmet cam were brief, but harrowing. The mirror room had changed. Not physically, but perceptually. The walls no longer reflected the team. Instead, they showed everyone else, people watching. People standing behind her. Endless rows of observers with no faces. Just outlines flickering like broken film reels. And then she saw Claire. Not the girl in protective custody. Not the one from the 1987 tapes. But the other Claire, the one who never left the mirrors. She spoke directly to Miriam. Not with lips, but with thought. And the transmission was recorded in a chilling line of raw data on the monitor attached to Lowe's back. I was never the reflection. I was always the original. You're the memory. The footage cut there. Lowe hasn't been seen since. 3 weeks later, the original Claire Bennett awoke in her cell with no memory of Lucas, the cameras, or Ashcroft. Her drawings had stopped. Her voice, when tested, did not match any known voice print. DNA was tested again. Came back inconclusive. Not mismatched. Just unreadable. Analysts theorized something no one wanted to say out loud. That Claire, the one they had been protecting, might never have existed at all. Or worse, she had been overwritten. That the Claire we followed from the start was simply a construct. An echo of someone else's memory, placed perfectly in the real world until she began to question. That's when the cameras started appearing. That's when Lucas unraveled. That's when she looked in the mirror and saw something watching her back. So where does this leave us? There's no arrest, no trial, no resolution. The Ashcroft Institute remains sealed under federal jurisdiction, now with a permanent armed perimeter and electronic jamming towers. Claire Bennett, the woman who started it all, has vanished. Some say she was taken. Others believe she never existed to begin with. And Lucas? His body was never found. Only that final, static-laced message echoing endlessly in the deep web. She's not done yet. 6 months later, a channel uploaded a single video. It was 13 seconds long. A mirror. A woman steps into frame. Claire. She lifts her finger and draws a line across the surface. And then, she steps through it into the viewer's side of the screen. The video ends with a black screen and a whisper. Look closer. For more chilling true crime content, subscribe to this channel.